So this is gonna be about the time where I learned that just because someone is a Kumu doesn't mean that they're meant to be your Kumu. Alright, so after the falling out and disconnect from C Rose, I was like, okay, gotta just ho'omau and holomua and channel all of this extra energy into my work into the Hawaiian Studies Master's program. But little did I know that my falling out with C Rose would come with some special prizes that would directly affect my work in the Master's program. Okay, so some backstory. When you're getting your Master's, usually you're going to be asked to write this big thesis paper. And then on top of that, you need to find yourself a chairperson who is like your lead support person for your thesis paper. And then you need like 2 to 3 committee members who will also kako you along the way. But the chairperson, that's the one who's going to be calling all the shots. And the person I had selected to be the chairperson at the time happened to be a Kumu who had played a humongous role in waking me up as a Kanaka, especially during my undergrad years. In fact, during my undergrad years, I did really well in this Kumu's classes. And this is prior to me ever being friends with C Rose, which is critical information. We will circle back to this later in this Mokuna. Now, this is where things get kind of tricky. So this Kumu, besides teaching myself, was also teaching C Rose because he and I were still taking a bunch of classes together. And somehow we'd always get partnered up for class projects because some of our Kumu recognized that we kind of work well together. So this Kumu in particular was definitely aware of that dynamic between C Rose and I. Not the romantic kind, but the friendship working kind. So anyways, as things started crumbling with C Rose, my relationship with that chairperson also strangely started to crumble as well. Because before then, whenever I'd go to meet with that chairperson to talk about my thesis, things felt good. Besides talking about my thesis paper, we talk about life, school, past events at Kamakuko Kalani, like the whole Joey Carter situation in the 90s and what it was like to be a student there at the time. It was just a olu olu environment, and I really enjoyed talking story with that Kumu. But again, like I said, once things with C Rose started going south, weirdly, as did my pilina with this Kumu. So one thing that usually came up in our one-on-one meetings, other than my thesis, were my classwork or sometimes my friendships, and specifically my friendship with C Rose. So of course, once I put an end to things with C Rose, I let this Kumu know that he and I weren't talking anymore. And yeah, once I said that, the vibes in our meeting got pretty heavy and quiet. There definitely was a lot of kaumaha on my end, I will admit that. Cause it was still fresh, you know? And I could tell that this Kumu wanted to know why. So I did offer Oya a chance to know more, which I would have simply said that it's too hard to just be friends with someone that you love. And that's it. But Oya thought it was best to not know since C Rose was also Oya's student at the time, which made sense to me. I was like, yeah, okay, probably best for you to keep it professional, and yeah. So we dropped it and went right back to discussing my thesis, which we were also small kind bumping heads on. It was also around this time that my social media postings were starting to blow up everywhere. And while this Kumu let me know that Oya appreciated what I was doing, this Kumu also repeatedly said that all this social media stuff would just serve as a distraction from my thesis, which at the time felt weird to me because I knew and saw how much the postings were helping and sparking necessary conversations, not just within our lahui, but like the whole online world. So later in the semester, there was one specific meeting where my chairperson was clearly stressed out with me regarding my thesis. And this was like maybe a week after C Rose and I had our falling out. So I was still grieving the loss of C Rose as a friend. I mean, he and I were still in classes together, literally sitting across from one another, but we weren't talking. It was just a sad time. Anyways, at this point, it was kind of like my chairperson and I were speaking completely different languages. You see, I'm more of a creative thinker and a creative person, and Oya was coming more from a scholarly academic approach. Both perspectives are good and necessary, but boy do they clash. And things already felt tense in the room, but what shook me to my core during this meeting literally came out of left field. So while we were talking, my chairperson brought up my pilino at C Rose and said that my writing and the showcasing of my Kuana Ike Hawaii wasn't as strong as it was when I was friends with C Rose. Then Oya proceeded to say that it really looked like I'd been using C Rose this whole time for his Ike, and now that I didn't have him around, my knowledge was at an elementary level. I was so shook at what Oya said regarding C Rose and my connection to him that my mind immediately went back to some childhood memories where I saw some haole teachers talking down to Hawaiian students. In fact, the chairperson sounded just like this one ignorant and privileged haole teacher I had, who would always judge and make assumptions about the local kids without knowing anything about what's really going on in these kids' lives. This Kumu was doing the exact same thing. This Kumu had no understanding whatsoever between the actual dynamic of the backstory of C. Rose and I. And for us Puna people, when someone says things that crosses the line, you can either expect us to rip you a new one, you know, like that Karen lady, or we'll just shut you out completely. So after those off-the-wall remarks, this Kumu then decided to put me on the spot and started testing me about the Kumulipo, you know, to confirm my elementary level knowledge. I remember Oya asked me, "Now you wrote Noeao about how the Kumulipo talks about duality. Explain that to me. How does the Kumulipo do that?" And remember what I said about Puna people? Well, this Kanaka from Puna chose option 2. I was so hurt and angry about what Oya just said that I just decided to smile and play dumb. I stared blankly for a bit and said, "I don't know, Kumu. Nothing's coming to me right now." And then Oya took that and decided to twist the dagger in me even more. Now, I know we talk a lot about the violence that our colonizers have done and continue to do to us, but bruh, the violence we do to each other sometimes, which I know is also a symptom of colonialism, but still, it just blows my mind. Here was this Kumu who I had admired and looked up to all throughout my undergrad, and all I could feel now, just in one halavai, was a massive wave of disappointment. Later, I would come to find out that this undercurrent of anger and resentment that this Kumu was carrying around actually had nothing to do with me, but past events that had gone unresolved within the Hawaiian Studies program. See, and this is why we need to maka'ala about these unresolved issues within our lahui, because it's not fair that us next generation Kanaka get caught up in it. It's painful and it's selfish for you folks to carry that eha around and then use it to shoot daggers at Kanaka who had nothing to do with it. I mean, I know I'm from Pahoa, but damn, I don't need daggers every day. Anyways, after that meeting, I decided, yeah, I definitely can't work with this Kumu anymore. After angry crying it out a bit in my dorm, I called up my best friend at the time and she immediately reminded me that, hey, there are literally a handful of other Kumu at Kamakaku who would love to work with you, Noeao. So right after that phone call, I went and emailed 3 Kumu, and at the exact same time, I kid you not, all 3 of those Kumu replied in the next hour. And I now had not just a brand new chairperson, but a whole fresh new committee team too. It was magic. And after that, everything flowed good and I graduated the following semester. Whew. Oh, the lessons we gotta learn along the way sometimes, huh? It can be mean. Or as Zuko from one of my favorite animated TV shows of all time would say,
"That's rough, buddy."
But before I sign off, I'd like to sing a little bit of a song that I feel is highly appropriate to wrap this Mokuna up. And it comes from my older sister's most favorite artist in the whole wide world. So you guys know how I have Janet, and like that's my queen. She's kind of like one of my akua. Well, Mariah Carey is her Janet. So yeah, when growing up, Mariah Carey played a big role in my childhood. Whitney, Mariah, Janet, Michael, yeah, all those amazing artists from the Aina A. So yeah, I'm gonna sing that real fast, and I dedicate it to the person this story was about. Okay, let's go. This goes out to you and you and you. When glory days turn to stormy nights, you must have been so petrified. You against the world in a losing fight, captive of the demons inside. So you sought an enemy like times before to mock ignorantly. So take heed of your words this time, 'cause what we don't need as Kanaka is to hate and fight. So I wish you well, I wish you well, I wish you well. I wish you well. Aloha.